It began with a whisper that turned into a legend. Two men, two motorcycles, and $6 million that disappeared into the smoke of a freight train somewhere between Nevada and California in the autumn of 1983. For years, no one knew where the money went, or what became of the men who dared to steal from a cartel that never forgives. The story begins on a cold night, September 14th, 1983. The Union Pacific Freight Train, code 4472, left the Elko yard at 10:45 p.m. carrying industrial supplies, food crates, and one sealed container marked "Property of Western Cargo Ltd." No one outside a few men in Mexico City knew that inside that container lay bundles of unmarked bills, $6 million in cartel cash, freshly laundered through front companies and bound for Los Angeles. The crew on board was small. Conductor Gerald "Jerry" Madsen, 39, a man who'd worked the rails for 20 years. Engineer Joe Hanley, silent and cautious. And a guard, a former military man named Vic Ortega. They had no idea they were sitting on fortune. At 11:22 p.m., somewhere near the empty plains outside Lovelock, Nevada, two motorcycles cut through the darkness. Black Hondas, their engines muffled, their riders wearing welding goggles instead of helmets. They moved with precision, like men who had rehearsed this 100 times. The older one, Daniel "Danny" Reeves, 32, was a mechanic from Reno who'd done a short stint in county jail for auto theft. The younger, Luke Barrett, 26, had been a trucker until he lost his license after an accident. They weren't professionals, not yet, but they'd been given a tip from someone who knew too much, a warehouse foreman who'd seen the container manifest and realized what it carried. He'd whispered about it one night in a dive bar in Sparks, thinking it was just talk. 2 weeks later, he vanished. Danny and Luke followed the train's route for days, timing its stops, studying the security patterns. They learned that after Elko, the train slowed to a crawl for 15 minutes near a signal checkpoint, long enough for someone to jump aboard. They struck that night. According to later reconstruction, they positioned their bikes near the western track crossing just before the checkpoint. When the train slowed, Danny jumped, hooking his arm through the steel rung, pulling himself up while Luke rode alongside, holding the tools. Inside the third freight car, they broke the lock, crawled through crates, and found the container. Its padlock was custom, cartel style, heavy, engraved with a sun symbol. Danny cut it with a portable grinder, sparks lighting his face. Inside, stacks of dollar bundles, wrapped in plastic, the faint scent of gasoline on the bills. Jesus, Luke, don't be spirited. This ain't company money. But greed was stronger than fear. They filled 2 military duffel bags, each weighing nearly 100 pounds, sealed the container again, and jumped off when the train curved around the next ridge. It was 11:46 p.m. They landed in dust, bruised, laughing. The next morning, the train reached its destination in California. When the container was opened, it appeared untouched. No one noticed anything wrong until 2 days later, when an accountant in Los Angeles opened the bundles and realized almost a third of the expected shipment was missing. Within 48 hours, 2 cartel couriers were executed. The message was clear: someone had stolen from the wrong people. By the time federal agents got involved, the thieves were ghosts. Danny and Luke vanished from Reno. Their apartments were found empty. A neighbor later recalled seeing a pickup truck leave at dawn with 2 motorcycles in the back. A week later, a gas station attendant in Utah said 2 men, matching their description, stopped for fuel, paid cash, and headed south. Then silence. Archive note: FBI internal memo, October 3, 1983. Subject: Train theft 4472, missing cargo. Local authorities suspect mechanical tampering. However, evidence indicates organized execution. Possible link to narcotics laundering networks. Recommend joint investigation. But the investigation went nowhere. The railroad company buried the case. Afraid of publicity, the FBI marked it as property theft, unconfirmed cartel involvement. Within months, the world forgot. Until 1989. 6 years later, a police unit from Santa Fe, New Mexico, was dispatched to investigate a double homicide at an abandoned motel outside town. The report was routine. 2 bodies, decomposed, found under floorboards by construction workers. Both male, both with gunshot wounds to the skull. At first, detectives assumed it was a local gang dispute. Then, during evidence cataloging, a deputy found something odd, a metal locker buried behind the motel's boiler room. Inside, a bundle of cash, yellowed, the edges melted by heat. And among it, a duffel tag with faded letters, property of Union Pacific. Detective Raymond Cole, 48, veteran of the force, knew what that meant. He'd grown up near the tracks, remembered the whispers about the lost train heist. He called in the evidence to the State Bureau. Forensics confirmed the cash matched the serial numbers from the 1983 theft. That's when the case reopened, quietly at first. Cole partnered with a younger investigator, Lisa Harding, 27, sharp and persistent. Together, they began piecing the fragments. Who were the 2 men? How they ended up buried in a motel. Transcript excerpt, police interview, March 3rd, 1989. Cole, you ever heard of a man named Daniel Reeves? Witness, maintenance worker. Yeah, I think he rented a room 12 years ago. Drove a black bike. Always paid cash. Cole, anyone visit him? Witness, one guy, blonde, quiet type. They fought once. Loud. Then both left. Place smelled like gas for days after. When they dug deeper, Cole found a report from 1984, a motorcycle accident near Albuquerque. The driver's ID had burned in the wreck, the bike registered under a false name. The coroner ruled it accidental. But the photos showed something odd, a second set of tire tracks leading away. Lisa noticed it first. He wasn't alone, she said. One of them got away. Then came the breakthrough. During a property audit, an old evidence clerk discovered a tape in a sealed envelope, marked undelivered mail, 1983. It had been found in a postal truck near the rail yard weeks after the heist, then forgotten. The envelope contained a cassette and a crumpled note that read, "If something happens to me, tell them it wasn't supposed to go this far." The tape was damaged, but partially playable. Transcript, audio cassette, fragment. Male voice. "They're watching us. Danny says we can't stop now. I just want it out." Inaudible 5 seconds. He met someone, Mexican guy. Said it's clean money. No one will notice. I don't trust it. The voice was identified as Luke Barrett. Cole listened to it 3 times, silent. Then he said, if Luke left that tape, maybe he never made it out of that motel alive. The case took on a darker tone. Evidence pointed not just to theft, but to betrayal. Maybe Danny had killed Luke, or maybe someone else found them both. Archive. Crime scene photo description. Polaroid, faded edges. 2 leather jackets folded neatly on a chair. A broken watch beside them. The clock hands frozen at 2:17. Lisa traced a line through a map, connecting Elko, Lovelock, and Santa Fe. It formed a diagonal corridor, the same path used by cartel couriers in the 1980s. She found another lead. A mechanic shop in Tucson registered under the name R. Vega. A search warrant turned up an old motorcycle frame with a hidden compartment welded beneath the seat, and inside it, a stack of decayed $100 bills. It was cartel money. Cole met Vega, now a frail man with arthritis, in a county hospice. When shown a photo of Danny Reeves, Vega closed his eyes. "Yeah," he said. "He came through once. Paid me to fix the carburetor. Said he was heading to Mexico. Never saw him again. But someone else had. A retired Border Patrol agent named Carlos Menendez contacted Cole after seeing a newspaper piece about the reopened case. He said in 1984, he stopped a man on a dusty trail near Douglas, Arizona. The man was riding a black Honda, nervous, alone. Claimed his name was Dan Riley. I remember the tattoo," Menendez said. "A small sun on his wrist. Same as that symbol from the lock." Cole looked at the photos again. On Danny's hand, half buried under dust in the motel, was a faded tattoo, a sun with jagged rays. The pieces fit, but the ending didn't. If both men died in 1984, who buried them? And why did the money stay hidden until 1989? Lisa proposed a theory. Someone followed them, took the remaining cash, killed them to silence the trail, and left the rest as a warning. But there was one final twist. While cataloging old evidence, Cole found a second cassette, mislabeled, stored with unrelated property seizures. It had been recorded on the same type of tape, same handwriting on the label. The audio was short, only 12 seconds. Transcript, tape 2. Unknown male. Tell them it's done. Both of them. Money safe. Vegas route confirmed. Cole played it again. The voice was calm, professional, not frightened. He asked Lisa to run a voice comparison. It matched a man named Victor Ortega, the train security guard in 1983. Cole leaned back in his chair, the weight of 6 years crashing down. Ortega had survived, vanished, and, apparently, collected his debt. Maybe, Cole said quietly, he was never guarding the train. Maybe he was waiting for it. Outside the station, the desert wind blew through the broken fence. Somewhere, in the silence between radio static and memory, the sound of the freight train still echoed. The official report would later call it an unresolved theft with probable homicide links. The files were sealed in 1991, but some say that in 1992, a man using Ortega's old ID crossed into Mexico with a duffel bag full of old bills, yellow by time. No one ever saw him again, and the money, the remaining millions, was never recovered. 6 years after the dusty motel discovery in Santa Fe, the case had turned into something like a myth inside law enforcement circles. A ghost story told by detectives who'd seen too many files and in silence. The Lost Train Heist, they called it. A story about 2 small-time thieves who outsmarted a cartel, an inside man who disappeared, and $6 million that never came home. But in 1995, a rookie journalist from Albuquerque named Thomas Hale stumbled upon the story again. Not through police channels, but through a private auction. Hale was 29, working for a small regional magazine called the Western Chronicle. He was at a foreclosure auction in Tucson when he noticed a box of old audio reels labeled Ortega V. The name meant nothing to him then, but the seller mentioned it came from a repossessed trailer belonging to a man who'd gone missing near Nogales. Hale bought the box for $5. Back at his apartment, he borrowed a reel-to-reel player from the university archive. The first few reels were blank or filled with static, but the third contained a voice, gravelly, calm, Spanish accent. If this is ever found, the man said, I didn't betray them. They betrayed me first. Hale Froze. He'd heard the name Ortega somewhere, then remembered the old police files he'd skimmed while researching unsolved crimes. He searched newspaper archives, pieced together fragments, and realized he might be holding the last confession of the man who planned the Lost Train heist. He contacted the State Bureau in Santa Fe, but by then, Cole had retired. Lisa Harding, now a senior investigator, returned his call. When Hale met her, she listened in silence as he played the tape. Her face didn't move until the end. This voice, she said, we thought he was dead. Hale asked if she believed Ortega was still alive. Lisa didn't answer. Instead, she asked if there were more reels. There were 8 in total. Over the following weeks, they listened together, reel by reel, as Ortega told his story, not as a guard, but as an inside man for the very cartel he was supposed to protect the train from. I was paid to make sure it reached Los Angeles, Ortega's voice said. But they cut my share. I had the keys. I knew the route. I knew when it slowed. They thought I was loyal. According to the tapes, Ortega was approached by a fixer from the Sinaloa network, a man named Miguel El Cuervo Ramos, who ordered the money to be moved discreetly. Ortega decided to double-cross them, replacing the original route with a detour and arranging for 2 nobodies to do the dirty work. Those nobodies were Daniel Reeves and Luke Barrett. He met them months earlier in Reno through a contact at a mechanic's shop. They were desperate, Ortega said. They didn't ask questions. They thought it was company money. I let them believe that. He gave them the map, the tools, even the signal timing. Then he followed the train on a separate route. They did their part, Ortega continued. Then I did mine. The next parts of the recording were distorted, as if Ortega had re-recorded over parts of his confession. But fragments remained. Luke panicked, said he wanted out. Danny wouldn't let him. I went to Santa Fe to collect. They were already gone. Then a click, a long pause, and a new voice. Different tone, younger, nervous. If you hear this, Vic, we're done. I'm not crossing again. You said no one would die. Hale and Lisa exchanged glances. That's Luke, she whispered. They realized Ortega hadn't recorded the tapes all at once. He'd collected them, pieces of conversations, maybe as leverage. On one reel, Ortega mentioned the second container, a decoy filled with scrap metal. They only opened one, he said. The real shipment went through Chicago 3 days later. That's why the cartel never admitted the loss. But I still had 6 million reasons to run. Lisa looked at Hale. He's saying the theft we know wasn't the real hit. It was insurance. The revelation changed everything. It meant the 1983 train robbery might have been a cover-up for a larger laundering operation. The cartel had allowed the theft, or pretended to conceal a much bigger transfer. Hale wanted to publish immediately. Lisa stopped him. If this is true, she said, people are still alive who won't want it printed. She was right. A week later, Hale's apartment was broken into. Only the reels were missing. His notes were untouched. He filed a police report, but the case went nowhere. Then, 3 days after the break-in, an envelope arrived at his office. Inside was a single Polaroid, an old man with gray hair sitting under a palm tree, holding a newspaper dated June 1995. Written on the back, "Don't look for me. Ve." Hale turned the photo over and saw the location printed faintly along the border, Puerto Penasco, Mexico. Lisa and Hale decided to go. They crossed the border under false press credentials, following the faint trail. Puerto Penasco was small, half-silent, filled with fishermen and tourists. They asked around quietly, showing the photo. Most shook their heads. Then one old woman at a cafe looked twice and whispered, "El Americano del Sol," the American with the sun. She said he came every week for coffee, paid in old bills, never spoke much. He had a tattoo of sun on his wrist. He's not alone, she added. He comes with a man in a uniform. The uniform. Lisa understood before Hale did. Cartel protection. If Ortega had survived, he wasn't hiding. He was protected. They waited near the cafe for 3 days. On the 4th morning, a man matching the photo arrived, limping slightly, wearing a straw hat. He sat at his usual table, ordered black coffee. Lisa whispered, "That's him." Before they could approach, a black Suburban pulled up. 2 men got out. They spoke briefly to Ortega, handed him a briefcase, and left. Hale started to raise his camera. Lisa stopped him. "We're dead if they see us." They watched instead. Ortega sat for another minute, then stood and walked toward the beach. There he knelt, opened the briefcase, and pulled out a stack of cash, fresh, crisp hundreds. He stared at the ocean for a long time, then burned one bill with a lighter. The wind carried the ash away. He turned, looked straight toward where they were hiding. For a second, their eyes met. Then he smiled, a tired, knowing smile, and disappeared into the sunlight. They didn't see him again. When they returned to their motel, the reels were gone again. But someone had left a cassette in the room's cassette player. It contained a single sentence. "Don't follow ghosts, Ms. Harding. You'll only find the living." Lisa never spoke publicly about the trip. Hale wrote a piece titled "The Vanished Train Man" that was never printed. 2 months later, his car was found on the side of a desert road outside Yuma. Engine running, doors open. No trace of him. The reels were never recovered. The official record states, no further investigative leads. Case closed. But in 2001, when Lisa was near retirement, she received a parcel at her home address with no return name. Inside was an old photo of a freight train under the desert sun. Same model, same number, 4472. Behind it, scribbled in pen, were coordinates near an abandoned rail junction outside Hermosillo. Lisa took a leave of absence and went. At the junction, half buried in sand, she found the remains of an old boxcar, rusted bullet holes along the side. Inside, she saw the sun's symbol carved into the wall. Beneath it, in dried paint, the debt paid. She took photos, sent them anonymously to the bureau. Weeks later, she was told the site had been cleaned up, hazardous materials. Nothing more. But in her private files, she kept one note from the envelope. A smaller photo showing 3 men, Danny Reeves, Luke Barrett, and Victor Ortega, standing together beside two motorcycles and a freight track. The caption read, August 1983. One last job. The photo was real. The negative dated correctly, which meant Ortega hadn't recruited them. They'd all planned it together. The betrayal came later. The myth about two thieves and a guard had always been half true. They'd started as partners, but greed split them apart before the first dollar was spent. In the following years, fragments of the money surfaced in odd places: a real estate deal in Phoenix, a gambling ring in Vegas, a donation to a church in Chihuahua. The bills all traced back to the same serial range. Someone was moving the money in small amounts, laundering it over decades. Some said Ortega built a quiet life somewhere along the Gulf Coast. Others believed he'd been killed and replaced by someone using his identity. In 2010, a retired cartel accountant was arrested in Sonora. Among his possessions was a pocket watch engraved with the words, "Time stops at 2:17." The same time frozen on the motel watch from 1989. When questioned, he said, "It was given to me by a man with a sun on his wrist. He said to pass it on when the train comes again." They thought it was metaphor. But 1 year later, in 2011, a freight manifest surfaced for an unregistered cargo transport across the same route as 4472, this time under the name Sunline Logistics. The listed cargo: industrial scrap. No inspection, no escort. 2 weeks after that, a derailment near Lovelock destroyed the car. No survivors, no records recovered. Locals said they heard motorcycles that night. One witness, a truck driver, later told a TV crew it was déjà vu. Two bikes, same sound, like ghosts chasing steel. Lisa, now in her 60s, watched the footage and said nothing. She closed her blinds, took out the old photo, and whispered, "You still out there, Vic?" Some nights, she played the last surviving tape Hale had duplicated before his death. It ended with Ortega's voice, faint but clear. Everyone thinks the story ends when the money's gone. But the money was never the point. It was the promise. In 2015, a rusted lockbox was discovered near a drained reservoir outside Tucson. Inside was a photograph, faded, nearly destroyed. It showed a beach at sunset, 3 motorcycle helmets, and a line written in sand. 6 million sunsets later, still counting. The handwriting matched Ortega's. Officially, the lost train heist remains unsolved. Unofficially, investigators believe the money was divided into 3 parts. 1 burned, 1 buried, 1 spent. The men who took it left more questions than answers, and perhaps that was their final trick. They stole not only the cash, but the truth. Some say the missing reels still exist, hidden somewhere in Mexico, containing Ortega's full confession. The true story of how 2 mechanics and a guard outplayed both the cartel and the feds. Others believe the tapes were never meant to be found. They were his way of staying alive, by keeping his secrets scattered like ashes in the desert. The last note in Lisa's archive reads simply, "Case status, unresolved. Subject possibly alive. If so, age 70 plus. Tattoo son." Underneath, in smaller handwriting, "If the train ever passes Lovelock again, listen. You'll hear the engine slow, just once for the ghost to climb aboard." And perhaps, in some forgotten corner of the desert, the echo of a motorcycle still rides alongside a phantom freight train, its wheels carrying a story that refuses to die, circling endlessly between greed, loyalty, and silence. What do you think? Was justice ever truly served? Leave your thoughts in the comments.